way
Let
out
me
of
tell you,
line.
the people don't trust you, and the people don't trust the media.
Right.
Climate change constitutes a serious threat to global security.
والله ايه ده بنت حمد بن جاسم.
And soon you will see what you will not believe. Look the guns machines in their hands. All of those are Hamas. Look, they are surrounding them. For playing songs in a wedding.
Choking them out. Look, he's choking them out. Look, he keeps tasing him. Call the police.
For over 2,000 years, we've been warned. Is this the end of days? Are ancient prophecies being fulfilled?
Wars and rumors of wars.
Hezbollah is Iran's poodle, but they do have 100,000 rockets. Even if Iron Dome intercepts 90% of them, you're talking about 10,000 rockets hitting Israel's population centers.
In only 2 years, we've seen 4 blood moons. The solar eclipse, and in Israel, the end of the Shemitah. Does this spell financial collapse for America and perhaps the rest of the world?
It's a banking takeover, man. How much more proof do people need?
While this video about the Messiah has gone viral, rabbis in Israel are further investigating the Hebrew calendar year 5776, which corresponds to 2016. Meanwhile, right here at home, we have really big problems.
Absolute out-of-control insanity.
No clothes on?
Horrifically, Planned Parenthood seems to classify that an unborn child is worth more in pieces than alive.
Basically crush below, I'm going to crush above, and I'm going to see that kid intact.
Because the kidney has value, because the liver has value, because the lungs have value, because the muscles in the legs have value. I would tell you that child has value.
Sightings of UFOs worldwide have become even stranger and more bizarre. Richard Shaw does an in-depth analysis of the aliens in the Kumburgos UFO. You won't believe what he found hidden in the original footage. In a desolate, forgotten place in Iran, a mysterious guest has appeared and is dictating the words of a very ancient and well-known text.
Yes, a man comes every night wearing all white. Guess what he had? The whole book of John.
Gary Stearman and Bill Salas are back with new prophetic insights. They're joined by Chief Joseph Riverwind, who gives a very unique perspective from a Native American point of view. What do they know that we don't? You'll also learn about a huge effort underway in Israel right now to rebuild the Third Temple. We interviewed Alvin Conway from the Extinction Protocol, who gave us hard evidence that earthquakes and volcanoes are reaching historic levels.
But I think everybody is in agreement that the planet is headed for some very, very, very dark days.
Dr. Brooks Agnew returns, and this time he's giving us information about Jade Helm.
This operation has HELM added to it. And what I understand that acronym stands for is Homeland Eradication of Local Militia.
He also weighs in on what an electromagnetic pulse weapon, an EMP, is all about. What would happen if the bees died off and the 7-year drought continues in California? Would this, in fact, create a cascading event? Finally, we are told men will faint from fear from what is coming upon the Earth. Is Planet X real? The topic just won't go away. Researcher Gil Broussard joins us. He spent years researching the Planet X phenomenon, specifically from the viewpoint of ancient biblical texts. Could we see Planet X arrive in 2015?
Calling Dr. Brooks Agnew.
really appreciate you coming. We're 3 stories underground here in a storage area. It's a good place to talk.
There's great shielding around us.
You know, a lot of people in the United States have grown leery of our own government. And over the summer, there was this Jade Helm operation in the southern states, and it alarmed so many people that even in Texas, they had a counter group to monitor these guys. What do you know about that?
Well, quite a bit. I mean, Jade operations have been around since about 2001.
Okay. And that's just a military parlance?
It's just military practice on civilian property.
All right.
I've gone to one of the events, and it was really quite entertaining to watch. All the blue armbands and red armbands, and they have these mock military exercises, and it was for public consumption. But this operation has HELM added to it. And what I understand that acronym stands for is Homeland Eradication of Local Militia. Now this adds a little different dimension.
It certainly does.
They advertise it as covering 5 states, but there are 13 states that have reported HELM activities in them. They're installing razor wire, which is not a temporary operation. That's a permanent operation. No one's going to go out there and gather up all that razor wire when it's over.
The military says it's just training soldiers for the realities of war. Critics say the Army is preparing for modern-day martial law.
Reporting from the Springdale Walmart, or the closed-down Walmart in Ohio. I want people to notice I'm on the back side of the compound, and this wire runs a lot farther than just the old Walmart.
They're also incorporating something way different this time, and that's it. They're taking an already militarized local police force, and they're weaving it into the operation.
This is their little complex. The sun's in the way. It's an underground facility. It's like a base. That's the top of it. Why in the hell does Walmart Supercenter need that? See the Walmart trucks? And I worked in this little white building here. See, it's like military style entrance, kind of like a FEMA camp.
This is not for operations in Afghanistan or Syria.
It's right here.
Exactly.
Let me ask you this. With that in mind, I mean, I'll just give you 3 quick scenarios that I can think of. Terrorists coming up to the southern border, which still remains porous, and at the same time uniting with terrorists here in the States, which may have dirty nukes smuggled over in the 90s. There's books on that. We've got enemies that may use an electromagnetic pulse weapon.
For the last 20 years, we've been coordinating our national power grid. That coordination has to happen if you're going to share power from one side of the country to the other. Power is generated in 3 phases. In order to put that power on a grid that can be used, say, in Florida, that's generated in North Carolina, that phase has to be matched perfectly. Otherwise, you get feedback and heats up the lines and creates havoc across the grid. So when this occurred, the management of the grid had to be unified, had to be organized. There's a federal contractor that takes care of that, the National Electrical Reliability Corporation. They held a symposium because they realized once this was done, it created a set of really unique vulnerabilities. So there were 3 of them. One was against cyber attack or physical attack. The other was against to compensate for natural disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, solar flares, things like that.
So they're being really proactive, very much so. Because they know something is coming, right? I mean,
yeah, but they've created their own vulnerability.
Okay.
They didn't have that vulnerability before when we had separate regions of Vista, PG&E, Duke. You know, they had their own systems and they didn't cross. But now they're all intertangled with one another.
How easy would it be for, let's say, North Korea, or just a rogue nation like North Korea, or a terrorist group, to launch an EMP?
Well, we were discussing this the other day, and I draw on my old Air Force training. The original attack motif in those days was a high-altitude EMP, which would knock out communications and low-level power management systems for about 6 hours. During that time, short-range attacks would be done, either already weapons that are inside the country or just offshore with submarines. As we know, in just the last year, the Chinese and the Russians have successfully tested underwater launched strategic missiles or tactical missiles. At the same time that occurs, and that would take out command and control, it would take out refineries, it would take out our local way to mobilize. At the same time, long-range ICBMs would come in, we'd never see them, and we would not be able to do anything to stop them. Now, if we just took the last part off, let's say they're not really motivated to kill 100 million people. They just want to take us out of the global picture as far as the world's policemen for 6 months, 2 years maybe. If they could take out large transformers, ability to refine gasoline and diesel fuel, they would pretty much take us out as a global policeman for up to 2, maybe 3 years.
And at the same time, that's going to impact the culture in America. I mean, if the grid begins to shut down, this is where the whole anarchy. I mean, we see it doesn't take much for the people to start, lighting the stores on fire and everything else.
We've seen dry runs on that already.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no need for a foreign country to invade the United States. For the last, let's say, 7 years, from an administrative point of view, from the administration, we have already been stratified. We've been manipulated to be racial, to be tribal, to be economic, we call it. Have you ever heard the term economic inequality? I never have. But now it's rich against poor. It's one race against another. It's one religion against no religion. We have been stratified, we've been poised, and there have already been dry runs in cities.
So the country is divided against itself.
We'll implode.
In the cop car, right? You know how it is when the police pulling you over? You're like, I'm not doing nothing. Why is he, every move I make, why is he making it? I'm not doing nothing. Because I have a Michigan plate. Other than that, why was you trailing me?
Because you made direct eye contact with me and held on to it when I was passing you.
What? I made direct. I didn't even see you until you were behind me. I'm not going to argue about it anymore, sir. If you want to keep talking about it, I'll just take your license back and give you a citation for the violation. We can take it to court. I'm not going to argue about it anymore. Okay,
right?
sir.
As what we can tell indications now, that as he was at the gas pump pumping his gas into his vehicle, a male suspect came up behind the deputy and shot the deputy multiple times. Deputy then fell to the ground. The suspect then continued over to him, then shot the deputy again multiple times as he laid on the ground.
We tried to appeal to them to let them know that this type of thing would come, it would happen. They thought they were indestructible and invincible because they took advantage of the weakness of black people for too long with all this police brutality. And now they've got black men out there that just can't take it anymore. And they're willing to act out. And they're willing to get you when you least expect it. Come at you when you're not thinking about it. It's not safe no more to be white in America. Lurking behind any corner could be an angry black man ready to take your ass out.
Yeah. We will self-destruct. If the police are taken out of the system, we've already seen what happens. We don't pull together like we did in World War II. We destroy each other, and they'll just let it happen.
But what if, and I have written about this, what if America is somehow taken down a few notches, and that's kind of what you're hinting at maybe?
You make a good point, because when you talk in a biblical scale, you're talking about players that were around in the Bible and that are going to be around in the latter days. You're talking about Babylon, you're talking about, the bear. You know generally who those forces are. But America's a baby. We've been around, sure, for 375 years, but as an organized nation for barely 200. That's nothing in biblical terms. So there is no, unless you say, oh, we're the latter-day Babylon, or we're the latter-day New Jerusalem, then you can kind of tie us into biblical prophecy and this and this and this is going to happen to us. But from a historical standpoint, we are a flash in the pan. And look how fast we have progressed to evil. We sacrifice our own children by the millions.
60 million.
We've been very good at getting cars long over because we know that, so I'm not going to crush that part. I'm going to basically crush below, I'm going to crush above, and I'm going to see when I get out of the tax. I'm going to throw a number out. I would say it's probably anywhere from $30 to $100, depending on the facility and what's involved.
People like to call us a melting pot, but let's talk about wood. We're not a block of wood. We're a packed bundle of splinters. And if you can ever get the splinters to disagree with each other, you could make it fall apart. Our weakness is also our uniqueness. We are a melting pot of all kinds of different ideologies, colors, religions, creeds, but the fact that we are that makes us not unified.
Rabbi Matityahu Glazerson lives in Jerusalem and is an expert in the Torah codes. Lately, all of his efforts have been focused on finding codes about the Messiah.
And all the time I prove clearly that the codes are part of the process of Messiah. It's written that before Messiah will come, lots of secrets will be revealed through numerology, gematria, through codes, and this is exactly what is happening.
He's always excited to share new codes, and recently showed some amazing discoveries to Richard Shaw.
Rabbi Glazerson, you worked with me on Torah codes Into Darkness, and the last time we met on that film was actually in Jerusalem. But then today you came to Los Angeles and you're showing me something which is so phenomenal, we just have to show it to people. And this is from a book from a rabbi that passed away. A Kabbalist that works with gematria, or the science of numbers, and finding things in the scriptures. It's beyond coincidence, in my opinion, that all this is happening. Can you please show us the 776 number that he found?
Yeah. What you see is the following. It's in Hebrew, but you have Biat HaMashiach, the coming of Messiah, Betavshin Ayin Vav, in 776.
In the past 6 months, all of you that are working on Torah codes have sent me some incredible tables, all pointing towards Messiah, and all of you seem to be working on that topic more than anything else right now. And can you please read these individual lines to us and explain what that means?
Now, the most important point is that next year is after sabbatical.
Yes.
According to our tradition, the time of Messiah coming is after sabbatical. Interesting to point out that 776 comes before 777. Now, mystically, number 7 represents kingdom, completion. And there are 3 dimensions of singles, tens, and hundreds. So the number 777 represents this completion.
That's
speak about the plane. The plane 777 plane, but this number is interesting. Okay, let us see now.
A lot of things are just kind of coming together here.
Together,
it's really
exactly.
Pretty incredible.
So let us see that what you see here is like following. Elokei Abraham, Elokei Yitzchak Elo Yaakov, the Lord of Abraham, the Lord of Isaac, the Lord of Jacob, 776.
And in English, it would probably be read, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you add up those words, it comes to 776.
Exactly.
Okay.
776.
And the next one.
Malchut David Leolam Va'ed, the kingdom of David, Leolam Va'ed, to the eternal verdict. Shuvu Elai v'ashuva Alechem. Come back to me, then I will come back to you. Yeah?
Yes.
776. Then you have here, Lema'ani Ese. God said, I will do for myself I will do. 776, 776.
Wow, that's a nice one.
Yeah. Then, Shuvu Banim Shevavim. Come back to me like naughty children. The idea that God asked us to come back to him, 776. Yeah, wow. He wants us to come back.
That's incredible.
Again, what is written here, Umalchutcha ad olam, your kingdom of God, yeah, will be ad olam, forever. Ad olam, forever. Then you have here, Amalchut ha'achrona, the last kingdom, 776.
Now what was that? Read that one in English again.
Amalchut ha'achrona, the last kingdom.
The last kingdom.
Yeah, it means that all the previous were not eternal, but this will be eternal.
So this is...
and the most interesting numerical value, gematria, is Biat HaMashiach, the coming of Messiah, 776.
Wow.
The numerical value of the Biat HaMashiach. Yeah.
And what's the big one at the bottom?
It's written here, what is written? 7R, the Tavshina and Vav, 776. This is a year. 776 is 776. And all these sentences are 776, which is the next year.
So, but it would actually be 5776.
Yeah, because you see, we look on days, we took every millennia, every song as a separate part.
Right.
Yeah. So therefore,
how do we know it's the 5th?
No, because you see, according to our tradition, Messiah will come in this millennium, which is the 6th one, right?
Really?
Yeah. This is why the numbers don't have the 5 here, because it's self-understood. When you speak about Messiah, you relate to 5,000 and. Yeah, because it's 6 million, you see? Yeah, this was
Is that a Kabbalistic thing, or is that Midrash?
I say Vilna Midrash, Kabbalistic. It is not more Kabbalistic, says.
Okay.
There is the Vilna Gaon. Yeah, like the Vilna Gaon says that all the indication to our history in the 6 millennia is in the book of Deuteronomy.
Deuteronomy.
Yeah, because Deuteronomy, even it is the 5th book, but we believe that the book of Genesis is divided into 2 parts. So basically the Deuteronomy is really like a 6th book.
Okay.
So therefore, a lot of indications of what is going to be in the world and what really happened, you find in the book of Deuteronomy, because it's the 6 millennia.
So in the book of Daniel, it says, and we actually put that in the Torah Code Into Darkness film, it says, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. And you were showing me something that seemed to refer to that.
So this is a verse from Daniel.
The verse reads, from the time that the daily sacrifice is abolished and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. Blessed is the one who waits for and reaches the end of the 1,335 days.
Rabbi Glazerson's gematria he found by the now deceased Kabbalist who posted these findings seems to indicate that the 1,335 days from the book of Daniel have something to do with the year 2016. If the year 2016 is written out in Hebrew and the letters added up, and the number 1,335 is also written out and added up, the same number, 3,382, appears. That number by itself doesn't appear to have any intrinsic value, but to find the same number for both the year 2016 and the number of days, 1,335 from the book of Daniel, seems to be more than just a coincidence.
Year 5,000, year 5,000, you see, full one.
Yeah.
776. So it clearly shows that these numbers of Daniel indicates to next year.
The wisdom of Rabbi Glazerson. Rabbi Glazerson maintains that the skips, how many letters there are from one letter of an ELS to another.
Sure.
The row skip, the column skip, or the skip that's in the Torah text, that from this I have to skip 100 letters to get to the next one, and skip 100 and so on. He says these are the same as gematria.
The central line of this table says the following: Yavo will come be'et, in time of trouble. Now we have other tables which shows that the time of troubles is this year. Israel
5775 or 2015.
Yeah, 5. This is 5, yeah.
Right.
Exactly, this year, before the Messiah. Then who will cause these troubles? Obama. Yeah, you see Obama, parallel. And parallel is very significant.
That's the word Obama in Hebrew.
Yeah, Obama. This is Obama, the word Obama. And we know quite well that in tables, in courts, parallel are very significant.
Back in 2009, during those days, now almost 6 years ago, I received tables from Rabbi Glazerson as well as Dr. Rotenberg. Some of the tables I received were also from Professor Haralick. In those days, most people had high hopes about Obama after being dragged into war since 2003. But the tables I received on Obama seemed to indicate something other than what we had expected. It says at the top, "Your father Islamic," which we know is true. Then if you read right to left like you're reading Hebrew, near the bottom, just below the words Barack and President, it says, "One born in Kenya." But there's a misconception where people believe that to find information in the codes that you simply have to put in a name and it all magically appears. That's just not how it works. The professors and rabbis come up with keywords that they are curious about and see if they appear along with the axis keyword or the subject of the whole table. The software doesn't simply display these things by itself. The words have to be entered and tested to see if they're in the table. Professor Haralick even found a very detailed table about radio commentator Glenn Beck. One final example is the table on Netanyahu. Rabbi Glazerson found this table on February 9th, 2015, over a month before he won the election. While the news media was telling us that the race was tight, we knew from the Torah codes that chances were high that Netanyahu would win the election, and he did.
Praise the Lord for Imam Khomeini, because he was the best evangelist for Christianity, because he brought the true face of Islam. So when they saw the true face of Islam, this hope in 1979, they thought it was going to be a utopia, and we were going to get blessed and take over the world even. Then we see that now Iran has the highest addiction rate in the world. We have one of the highest unemployment rate in the Middle East. We have one of the highest divorce rate in the world. What's happening? We have economy that's decimated. We have social unrest. We have political unrest. So this perfect storm has happened, and everyone knows that the problem is Islam. The difference between Iran and the rest of the Middle East is the Middle East wants to go into what we've already had for 36 years, an Islamic state. And we know, and the Iranians know, that Islam is a lie, that Islam is the problem, and Allah is not God. But they're still seeking God. And this is where Jesus comes in, his compassion, and shows that I am the living God.
We're here speaking with a gentleman who will remain anonymous, and his face is blacked out for a reason. Why is it that your face is blacked out and we're disguising your voice? What is it that you do in Iran that we're taking these precautions?
Well, I'm the #1 enemy of the state. I am bringing people to Jesus. I'm talking about the living God of the Bible. And 3 years ago, Ahmadinejad and Khomeini decreed and had a fatwa that says the #1 enemy of the state is Christians, the house church movement, and Christianity.
And so, with Ahmadinejad doing that, why are they clamping down on Christianity? What's going on in Iran that would make them want to declare Christianity to be the #1 enemy of the state? What's happening?
Well, before the revolution, there was only 200 believers in 1979. But now God has moved so mightily. He's just doing everything through dreams, visions, power encounters, that there might be up to 1 million believers. And the government's terrified of this. There's so many, the most radical nation in the world now might have a huge Christian population. Now imagine that, if Iran becomes a Christian nation, what kind of shockwaves would that send in the rest of the world?
Be huge. Recently, Benjamin Netanyahu came over and addressed Congress in the United States here, and he said specifically and with great passion that the deal that the Obama administration is trying to put together with the Iranians is a bad deal.
I don't believe that Iran's radical regime will change for the better after this deal. This regime has been in power for 36 years, and its voracious appetite for aggression grows with each passing year. This deal would only whet Iran's appetite for more. Would Iran be less aggressive when sanctions are removed and its economy is stronger? If Iran is gobbling up 4 countries right now while it's under sanctions, how many more countries will Iran devour when sanctions are lifted? Would Iran fund less terrorism when it has mountains of cash with which to fund more terrorism? Why should Iran's radical regime change for the better when it can enjoy the best of both worlds, aggression abroad, prosperity at home? This is a question that everyone asks in our region. Israel's neighbors, Iran's neighbors, know that Iran will become even more aggressive and sponsor even more terrorism when its economy is unshackled and it's been given a clear path to the bomb. And many of these neighbors say they'll respond by racing to get nuclear weapons of their own.
In your opinion, if the Iranians get a nuke, would they in fact use it against Israel?
We are Shiites. And Shiites believe that in the last days, the Savior will come, the Mahdi. But one way to usher in the Mahdi, or to make him come faster, you could say in layman terms, is to start a chaotic war with Israel. And what better way than dropping a nuclear bomb in Tel Aviv? And the powers that be, Khamenei, Ahmadinejad, even though he's not in power right now, but that mindset, that 5% which controls the country, they're gung-ho on this, aren't they? Yes, because they believe it with all their heart. They're very passionate about their eschatology. And even Rouhani, he's still a Shiite. It doesn't matter. See, the difference between Rouhani and Ahmadinejad is this. Ahmadinejad wasn't a liar. He actually told everyone in the world what he wanted to do. Rouhani's lying. If they're going to attack Israel, well, first of all, they are attacking Israel, always through proxies, through Hamas, through Hezbollah. You know, they're always attacking Israel. So, I mean, there's no preemptive. They're in constant war with Israel, just not straight, you know, not in your face. It's always through the shadows like Hamas and Hezbollah.
Hezbollah will attack when Iran tells it to attack, and not before. Hezbollah is Iran's poodle, but they do have 100,000 rockets as far as I've heard. Even if Iron Dome intercepts 90% of them, you're talking about 10,000 rockets hitting Israel's population centers. You're talking about London under the Blitz. Yeah. Israel's chief of staff of its Air Force has already issued a warning and said, should Hezbollah attack Israel, Lebanon won't recognize Lebanon after it's over.
Tactical nuke, or aren't you?
No, this wouldn't be nuclear weapons, but we can do an awful lot of damage with conventional weapons, and we wouldn't have our hands tied behind our back this time.
We also know that Barack Hussein Obama is trying to lift the sanctions in Iran and allow them, I guess, to go ahead with their nuclear ambitions. Why would Obama want to lift sanctions? What's motivating him to do this, in your opinion?
Well, in my opinion, and in Iran's opinion, is Obama's a Muslim, and he's a...
Say that again. Obama's a what?
Is a Muslim.
Okay.
And he's a Shiite Muslim. Why? Because his first name is Hussein. And all Shiites have these names, like Hussein, Reza, Ali. Shiite Muslims use these names. So it's very interesting that Obama's first name is Hussein Barack Obama.
We knew nothing about him. He was sold to us by the media. Even people who were his boosters have to admit they know zero about him. What do we know about him? He's a Muslim. We have the primary enemy of America is Islam. Let's call it by a spade. It's committed to our destruction.
We know that every Friday in Tehran, thousands of people gather in the square, shout, "Death to America, death to Israel." Why do they do that?
So I've been to these gatherings where they bust people in first from all over the city. They give them a free lunch, okay? They turn on the camera and say, "Death to America, death to Israel." But the second they turn off the camera, they go back and do the regular thing. This hatred that you're seeing right now is not in the population. Maybe 5% of the population feels this way.
We touched on supernatural occurrences that are happening in Iran.
I was in a city, and this man comes up to me and says, "Come, you have to see this man. He's having some man come to him and tell him to write these things down." This is in the middle of no man's land, and it's right by Afghanistan, which is a huge opium trade. Actually, opium is cheaper than bread in this city because there's so much opium. So we go to the man's house. The man has nothing. He lives on a rug in a small little shack. No man's land, no electricity, no gas, no running water. He has a well, he has little gas tanks, and that's how he's living. So we said, "Well, what happened?" He says, "Every night a man comes to my house. He knocks on my door, but he's wearing all white, and he's very glorious. He has just something about him. And he tells me, I let him inside, and he tells me to write these things down." Well, like, "So what is it?" He's like, "Let me bring out my notebook." Brings out his notebook, and it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh." And it's the whole book of John, verbatim. Without the verses, without the chapters, just like a bomb.
Here's the story.
And then I was like, so what happens? He's like, he comes in and I start writing. But as I get tired, because he's just telling me to write, I would fall asleep and he'd be gone every morning. But for 1 month, he came to my door and knocked every night. And he's like, so what is this? So we told him, this Jesus. And he couldn't believe it. He was just so taken back by it.
Hamas came to power, and they came to power in a very brutal way, throwing people off 3-story buildings. And so, okay, so they won the election, and they're supposed to rule their people. That's what you elect government officials to do.
Hamas has one industry, and they're very proud of it. Their industry is death. When your industry, and I don't say that in a hyperbolic fashion, that's literally their quote, our industry is death. When that is your industry, you're not a terribly good municipal steward. What that means is the basic things that government is supposed to do for its people, which are not glamorous nor revolutionary nor particularly end of days, collect garbage, make sure the sewage is disposed of properly, aren't being done to the extent that you have sewage leakage now in Gaza, which has made, I've heard estimates as high as 80 to 90% of their water undrinkable. You have a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, none of which is being caused by Israel's quarantine of certain things that can be used for dual purposes. You have a humanitarian crisis because Hamas is in control of Gaza and they are destroying it.
You've got to eradicate them once and for all, because they'll just keep coming back and doing the same thing, a year or two, whatever.
The reason I don't see it happening, certainly in the near term, is could we go in and conquer Gaza? Yeah, absolutely. It would be at a high cost of Israeli soldiers. It would be at a high cost of Palestinians, but we could absolutely do the job and it wouldn't be difficult. The problem then is, who then runs Gaza? Do we reoccupy Gaza, which no one in Israel wants to do? Do we then leave a vacuum which ISIS is going to fill? So the current Israeli strategy has been to try to weaken Hamas to the point where it won't fight Israel, but it's strong enough to fight off ISIS.
The Republican Party, particularly the leadership, has abandoned the Constitution and the treaty power of the United States Senate. They can stand between Obama and the Iranian terrorist regime and protect our nation and our allies, but they won't.
Iran is sponsoring terror all over the world, and we all know that, and yet our current administration continues to play footsie, and then John Kerry goes over there and does this. If Allah wills it. I mean, where am I? What planet is this? But with that in mind, the Israelis know what they face. Do you see, and the Iranians know that the Israelis want to do a preemptive strike. Who do you think will move first?
If Israel ever senses that Iran is on the verge of getting a nuclear weapon, Israel will have no choice.
Have no choice.
And it will do whatever is necessary.
So they're being backed into a corner, literally.
Well, everything that the current administration has done, saying that it's doing it to try and prevent a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, is having the exact opposite effect. The Saudis feel betrayed, the Egyptians feel betrayed, the Emiratis feel betrayed, the Jordanians feel betrayed, the Israelis feel betrayed. So you have something that I would have thought would have been impossible. You have all of a sudden Israel, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, the Emiratis, all on the same page.
Right, all at the same time, right.
And have become united in their belief that they've all been thrown under the bus and that the only way that they are going to survive is to act together, and at present covertly, but they all realize they have a common interest, they have a common enemy. And the Iranians, oddly enough, you have on the other side the Iranians, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the present administration of the government of the United States of America.
What's happening to the bees? beekeepers across the country are experiencing a dramatic loss to their hives in what's being called colony collapse disorder. This has been developing for a decade, but until the past few years, not that much was known about why this was happening. If there are no bees, then we would experience a dramatic collapse in the food chain. There have been many theories, from the use of GMO crops, certain pesticides, even cell phone towers have been blamed. Beekeeper Keith Roberts showed us what goes on in a hive and shared his knowledge with LA on what's been happening. But we get the feeling this isn't the whole story.
A lot of people don't really appreciate the type of scale, the type of enormous work that the bees have to do in order to produce honey. Now you see up here a single frame. Well, that's all fine and great, but well, what went into this frame of honey? A single pound of honey takes 2 million flowers. You're looking at an observation hive, and all these bees are free to come and go as they please through a hole in the wall. What you're looking at is about 30 to 40,000 bees inside of here. Now, most of which are female. There's only a handful of drones. The girls, the females, they're the ones that do all the work.
Without the bee, is it safe to say that there would be no food?
Well, the truth is that our food supply would get very bland very quickly.
Okay.
So many of the fruits and vegetables that we enjoy, gone. A lot of the nuts, gone. It would be very grain-based, barley. There wouldn't really be much. Now, whether or not we'd be wiped out from the face of the earth, maybe. It would be very uncomfortable. And an argument certainly can be made that we would be nutritionally stressed.
We've heard, and it's all over the net, and it's been going on for several years, that there's some sort of a virus or some sort of a sickness that is destroying many of the hives. I remember talking to a beekeeper out in Ohio not too long ago who said lost all of his hives.
Well, colony collapse disorder is a phenomenon that has been going on for a while now, for almost a decade. It really accelerated. The Army Corps of Engineers, working in conjunction with beekeepers, actually were able to find a novel virus that was on some of the comb and some of the bees associated with suffering from CCD that wasn't present in other hives that weren't suffering from this collapse. So, but that's just part of the story. The bigger idea to understand is that it was a proverbial straw that broke the camel's back.
Okay.
The bees were already stressed from monoculture. They were already stressed from nosema and foul brood and mites. They were already.
These are all diseases.
These are all diseases that they're dealing with, and then they're dealing with these new wave of systemic pesticides.
In the United States, is this like, 10%, 30%?
Beekeepers were losing, some cases, as much as 50% of their hives.
Wow.
And then, right now, the loss is down to about 30%, which is still enormous. It is still really bad to lose 30% of your bees. But there's also been tons of other stressors that have kind of overwhelmed CCD in priority. The brutal winter that the Midwest experienced last year.
Record
yeah,
setting.
I mean, we're talking that was terrible. And so over here on the West Coast, we've got the drought. So as I said, it takes 2 million flowers to make a single pound of honey. Well, in a drought, all the sage, all the local buckwheat, all of that micronutrition that the bees usually take for granted isn't there.
Are the GMO crops, are they affecting the bees?
We don't know yet.
Cell phone towers, sprouting like weeds, basically. The rumor is that the signals are affecting the bees. Can you speak to that, please?
False. Completely false. Does not affect the bees. Bees actually, they aren't affected by that. That was a rumor, and it was actually disproven by scientists. It's very interesting about the fact there's actual letters that you can find that were between beekeepers back in the early 1700s that were asking one another, are all your bees gone too?
Wow.
So this isn't exactly unprecedented.
Okay.
But could it be that there is yet another explanation for the bee die-off? While Keith really knows his bees, Dane Wigington has studied the overall problem of geoengineering. His website has been highly visited, with over 18 million hits. He's posted the 150-plus U.S. patents for weather modification since the 20s through 2003. There may be others. Positive proof that geoengineering has its origins with the elite and the military. Spraying of aerosols to affect the weather or block UV rays is being ramped up. Whether you believe in global warming or global cooling, anyone can see that it's being used extensively. What is this well-known slurry of nanoparticles of aluminum, boron, and barium doing to us? And could it be that this is what's killing the bees, not to mention causing weird weather patterns, even drought? In a recent radio interview on Cut to the Chase Radio, Dane Wigington explains what happens when bees die in wilderness areas that aren't affected by unusual pesticides or other toxins.
My precipitation. Hoped I would not find the metals named in geoengineering patents, but I did. Aluminum, barium, strontium. The levels kept escalating, quite simply, Marshall. Clearly this was going on in our skies, toxifying every breath I took. I was faced with a battle I did not want. We now have peer-reviewed study proving that the bees have aluminum content that's astronomically high. 3 parts per billion in the human body and the human brain is a problem.
Wow.
What does 200 to 300 parts per billion do in a bee? So again, we now know, peer-reviewed study, that the bees are experiencing conditions that resemble dementia and Alzheimer's. Of course they're dead. Of course they have aluminum in it. Aluminum is raining down around the globe. The red flags keep going up. It's time that academia quit worrying about their paychecks and their pensions and start showing some courage.
California, famous for its beaches, great weather, and the movies.
Hey guys, welcome to Hollywood. Here we are, Spider-Man, Captain America, and
Spider-Man.
Twin Spiders in the house, plus Cap. Say hi to Cap. Having a good time, everybody.
Los Angeles is home to nearly 10 million people, all needing water. In 2014, USA Today said that the drought has persisted over the past 15 years, but the worst has been since 2011. NBC News in 2014 did a story on how a sophisticated $800 million tunnel was almost ready to pull water from Lake Mead to feed Las Vegas. That domed roof was capped by a 1,900-pound stainless steel ball that will be lifted off by a crane from the bottom of Lake Mead. All the western states are being impacted by this historically severe drought. The search took LA to a dried-up lake bed near Malibu.
Daughter was playing in the lake.
Along with us is Colorado River expert Andy Jones.
No, Water's Edge would have been right in here.
Yeah, we're standing at Water's Edge, all the cattails and everything else, indigenous plants that you would see.
Right. This is what happens when you're in a dramatic, long drought. I would argue that the drought would be more like a 15-year drought in the areas that immediately affect the Colorado River and the aquifer. This is a localized result of the California drought, and this is what is seen throughout the rest of the state. It's causing the agricultural to be fallowed, the ground, and to have acres and acres of trees of all types.
Just cut down, deliberately.
Cut down, just completely taken down, ground up, and used as wood chips.
Wow.
So unless we start seeing a tremendous amount of rain and snowpack on the western side of the Colorado Rockies, this is what we can pretty much predict will be the near future.
And this of course is incredibly dire. It's traumatic. Not only this lake here used to be filled with fish. People would drive in to this area from all over, like within a 20-30 mile radius. They just come here, fish, and goof around, swim, whatever. All that's completely gone.
What we're seeing is a situation similar to this in the far northern reaches of Lake Powell. Major marinas are now hundreds of feet from the river channel. Where there used to be a lake is now literally a river channel flowing Colorado River water. In the middle of July 2015, Lake Mead dropped below the 1,075-foot Regime 1 layer.
When you say 1075, what does that mean?
That's the elevation of the lake above mean sea level.
Okay.
And this is the surface level at which the Bureau of Reclamation is going to start having cutbacks on water withdrawals and diversions from the Colorado River. It is basically the phase 1 of drought. If that falls further to regime 2, then even more drastic cutbacks will start to occur.
And that would be what?
More CAP water would be lost.
CAP meaning?
Central Arizona Project, that provides water to agriculture in the Arizona valleys, water for Phoenix, Arizona, Scottsdale, Arizona, and those surrounding cities, and even as far away as Tucson.
Wow.
They'll start seeing dramatic cutbacks at regime 2 as far as their ability to withdraw water from Lake Havasu, which is on the Colorado River. And if it drops even lower, which we don't see any reason it won't because of the current long forecasted rain, it could stop production of electrical power in Hoover Dam. And it will then get to the point where if it drops so low, the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California could see curtailments.
So you used, on the phone with me, you used this term, a cascading event. How is this going to happen?
Well, you got a couple of factors. You've got the level of the water in Lake Powell is really not regulated. They can drop that lake as low as they want. At its current elevation, it's producing a lot less power than it's capable of. On the side of Lake Powell is the Navajo Generating Station, a large coal-fired power plant. Now, their water, cooling water, comes from the Lake Powell itself. Now, if that water drops so low that they can no longer draw water from Lake Powell, that power source goes away. Again, if that water continues to drop, the Glen Canyon Dam will no longer produce electricity. That would be the first couple of parts of the cascade. Now we move down the river to Lake Mead. Now, once Lake Mead hits a certain level, Hoover Dam produces 0 power. So at this point, if this drought continues and if we keep seeing what we're seeing and have seen, you're looking at 3 major power sources: Hoover Dam, Glen Canyon Dam, and the Navajo Generating Station going to 0 output.
The Colorado River is not getting the water that it used to get. It's not flowing the way it used to flow. We all know that. There's another dynamic that's happening to the river right now, and that is the sudden appearance of algae blooms.
We started seeing Microcystis aeruginosa, or what's normally called blue-green algae.
Okay.
And it's a common algae in the Northeast and in the Midwest and back east. It's had horrible effects in lakes back there, and we have a lot of history of that. But in the Colorado River, we had never seen this type of algae before. And it seems that within the last year, the normal algae that would appear in the river is being consumed by quagga mussels that are an infestation of the Colorado River. Now, these quagga mussels, they don't appear to eat the blue-green algae or the Microcystis aeruginosa. So the abundance of that algae is bloomed and has blown up to a situation where it is possible, given the right nutrients and the right temperature, that algae could bloom in the majority of the lake. Now, as far as that algae growing, it starts to consume dissolved oxygen. As it consumes dissolved oxygen, the smaller microbes and the small fish, the minnows, will start to die. And when they start to die, that'll create more dissolved oxygen demand because their bodies will need to oxidize. And then as the DO continues to drop the dissolved oxygen, upper level fish will start to die off because they will suffocate. Now, when all the algae gets to the point where it dies, it goes into putting out poison toxins, that are hepatogens that attack the liver, and that are neurotoxins that attack the central nervous system.
To not only humans, but all animal life. Is that
everything.
Correct? Everything, okay.
And when that algae goes into a die-off, it's possible for all of the dissolved oxygen in that lake system to be consumed. And when that does, you're looking at everything in the lake being dead.
Wow.
And if that were to occur in Lake Mead, and subsequently again in Lake Havasu, then that's a point where we don't even know what would happen.
That's a point of no return, essentially.
We are approaching the point of no return now. These particular views you're looking at are in Lake Havasu, in the lowermost southern part of the lake. This view shows the inlet of the Central Arizona Project's diversion channel, where the water is channeled through the lake into the intake plant for the Central Arizona Project. In the corners, you can see a lot of the algae in a concentrated group. And if there is not something done to stop this algae, then we don't know what's going to happen.
Are you getting the impression that people are starting to, for lack of a better expression, wig out? Are you seeing that at all? Are you emails reflecting it, anything like that?
Absolutely. I'm getting the sense that people are very much alarmed by what's going on. The level, there's more depression, people are reporting more issues sleeping. They're very concerned about the state of affairs, not just what's going on geologically with the planet, but what's going on with the political, with the world geopolitical turmoil. I think people are very much concerned. I think most people are in a state of profound consternation because they don't know what's happening. And I think that's the worst situation to be in. I think our readers, the people that tune into our sites are very much, they know what's happening, so it sort of conditions you to be aware of it getting much worse. So it kind of prepares you as a preparation process. But definitely, I see more people concerned about it, more average people talking about it, these events that they didn't used to talk to. A lot of the readers who were having problems, say, 2 or 3 years ago, convincing their relatives that something was going on with the planet and the world, are now finding the story very easily. Their testimonies are becoming much easier to explain and for people to accept because they see, people can look around and see the events unfolding around them.
You sent me a graph, signs of change in geological processes. And on the left-hand side, we've got volcanic eruptions, and we can see that graph just steadily going up. And of course, on the right-hand side, you've got the earthquakes. Same thing. The graphs are going up, and of course, it's amazing. It's just when we look at this type of data on a graph, and those two, natural occurrences, volcanic activity, earthquake activity happening together. Those are two major signs. There's a prophecy which is about 2,000 years old, and it talks about wars and rumors of wars, famines, pestilence, earthquakes in diverse places, troublesome times. Are you familiar with that passage?
Absolutely. 24th chapter of Matthew.
Okay. How do you relate to that?
Well, I think one of the things that we see is that the signs are unfolding around us. And I think for the people, for a person of Christian faith as I am, I believe you can talk about scripture all day, but I think when people can see it for themselves, Christ spent so much of his time performing miracles, even more miracles than he did actually preaching. When people can actually see the events unfold, when they can see and touch and feel and interact with it, they're much more likely to accept it. And I think the science has been, the data has been driving the train, so to speak, and the science has been leading the way and telling us that something is wrong with our planet. And we're not the only ones saying it. It's not a religious message anymore. It's a scientific message. The scientific community is united that our climate is undergoing some type of change. Now, they don't know exactly what's going on, but it's sort of a lot of confusion as to what's causing these processes to go awry. But I think we have a consensus that something definitely is going wrong with our planet.
Where do you think this is all headed?
Well, my concern is that we are going to see, as I've said, prophecy being fulfilled. And now the question is, which one? Will there be more than one? And that sort of thing. And Bible prophecies inherently are information that God knew about. He knows the future from advance, that are not just, like 9/11, which was a very powerful event, or the burgeoning of ISIS or something like that. Mm-hmm. These are events that when they find fulfillment will not only impact the area affected that takes the punch of the prophecy, but will affect the whole world. So because it's a world-affecting type event, I think that's why God put it through the prophecies, through the ancient prophets. So I think in 2015, maybe carrying over into 2016, you're going to see a world-impacting prophecy find fulfillment. And I think it's going to be centered in the Middle East. And I think it's going to be a war, maybe even a nuclear war with the destruction of Damascus or hitting Iran or something like that.
You know, with the rise of lawlessness, this is certainly one of the hallmarks of the last days. We look around and we see it everywhere. We look at the riots in Ferguson or the riots in Baltimore. But I want you to address the atrocities that we are seeing in the Middle East, specifically in regard to ISIL, Islamic State of Syria, Iraq, and the Levant, its original name, which has been shortened by the media to IS, Islamic State, where they're wiping out Christians.
In Somalia, in Sudan, in Iran.
There are reports of 4 Christians slaughtered with knives and machetes in the streets.
The mainstream media and human rights groups have basically turned a blind eye to the systemic and brutal persecution of Christians, not just in Egypt, but throughout the Muslim world.
Destroying Coptic churches, destroying archaeological evidence, killing thousands in Nazi-like ways, lining them all up and just blasting them away.
Well, I think we're deep into the end times, and the actual face of Islam, which is a religion of the sword, it's no longer camouflage. They're revealing what it truly is. They want to subrogate the planet, and this is their method. They will try to preach Islam, but if that doesn't work, they will take it violently. And that's what you're seeing right now. And that's why the Islamic State, they are truly doing what they believe is inherent in Islam. And so they're basically acting out, taking over the planet as if it's their final act of desperation because they see the opportunity to do it. And they're not getting restrictions from that from the presidential administration we have in place.
Climate change constitutes a serious threat to global security.
والله ايه ده بنت حمد بن جاسم يا فندم انا ما اعرفش حضرتك يا فندم اللي تعرف انا ما عنديش فكره وايه اللي حصل لنجلة حمد بن جاسم
هو شاه ايران فين يا احمد بيه فين شاه ايران اين مش امريكا اللي باعته وهتبيعك يا تميم.
No one is stopping things over there. We have red lines that are being erased, Syrian chemical weapons, Iran's nuclear program, or we've got nothing that's prohibiting Hezbollah from getting thousands of rockets, or ISIS from taking over territory, or Hamas to rebuild tunnels. There's nothing in check to stop that right now, and that's why they're going out with gangbusters and showing their ugly face, and that's the ugly face of Islam. There's no way around it. Now, Psalm 83 would not have made sense before 1948, because the central theme...
1948 is the rebirth of Israel.
Rebirth of the nation of Israel. Because the central theme of Psalm 83 is the destruction of the nation of Israel. It talks about, written 3,000 years ago by Asaph, who was one of King David's worship leaders, but he was also, we're told in 2 Chronicles 29:30, a prophet. And so what he tells us is that there's going to be a group of Arab nations that share common borders with Israel that will someday form a confederacy. They will form a plan, a strategy, and what they want to do is they want to destroy the nation of Israel. Psalm 83 verse 4 is the theme there. It says, they will come to, it says, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. So what we have is,
amazing.
100 years ago, this would have not made any sense because there was no Israel between 70 AD and 1948 AD. And I point out in my books that this did not happen before 70 AD, so it was still a pending prophecy. Then we find out who the belligerents are in verses 6 through 8. We realize that these are the participants that have voted against there being in Israel in 1947 at the United Nations. They came against Israel in the War of 1948. Members of them, Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, who are in Psalm 83, came against Israel in 1967, 1973. Of course, now that they've lost those wars, they've developed different types of antagonisms against Israel, propaganda, terrorist groups, Hezbollah, Hamas, etc. They're going to the United Nations, trying to get land for peace, this sort of thing. And this is all going to come to a climactic conclusion. Diplomacy will fail. It already is, because giving God's land to Arab peoples who have hated Israel for centuries and don't even recognize Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. It is not biblically endorsed, LA.
People forget that 10 years ago in 2005, we did exactly what the international community and then Senator Barack Obama said we should do that would get us instant credibility, not just credibility, but peace. We deployed the Israel Defense Forces against 10,000 people, not Palestinians, but against Israeli Jews. We pulled them out of the settlements, which were supposedly the problem. We pulled them out of their homes, their farms, their places of worship, without one single caveat. We gave Gaza back to the Palestine Authority, and what we got in return wasn't credibility, wasn't peace. We got Hamas, 12,000 rockets, and last summer we got one of the most terrifying things I've seen in 40 years as a soldier, and that's terrorist tunnel attacks that literally came up in our front yards, in kindergartens, in dining halls, with the attempt to kidnap, maim, and murder and drag back into Gaza our men, women, and children.
Watch. This is the wedding party. Look, Hamas is coming now with those trucks. You see the trucks? Look. Look how many trucks. Just because they are singing songs. They are coming with their guns, and soon you will see what you will not believe. Look the guns machines in their hands. All of those are Hamas. Look, they are surrounding them. Look at this. For playing songs in a wedding, they are killing their people. What if you do something else? Look in there. They are beating the guy who is is getting married. They are beating the hell of him. Look. They killed him. It was a wedding. Look what they are doing. They are destroying the chairs, destroying everything. Why? Because they are playing songs.
They started it. You're all insane. They started it. What are you all saying? They started it. The Israelis did not throw their... For months this has been going on.
How do you resolve it?
What are you supposed to do?
How do you resolve it?
How do I know? Because I have been over there. That's how I know. And I wish the world would know. And BBC should be ashamed of themselves. And CNN should be ashamed of themselves. And everybody, stop it already.
Well, there's a legitimate concern about an economic collapse in this country.
To save its banks, Greece may need to let them go. Doing so would help the economy, but would hand control to Eurozone leaders. Wall Street Journal. No, not the world's socialist website. They've lost their sovereignty, as have all nations that are a member of the Euro group.
There will be circuit breakers in place. There will be trading halts. If stocks fall 7% or about 1,100 points, you'll see a trading halt for as much as 15 minutes. If there's a 20% decline in this country, you will see stocks close for the day. Those are the rules. That's typically the way it works.
That there will be a global economy, a global world order, a cashless society, actually run by an antichrist in the end times. So the hints of this happening and manifesting, I believe, are happening right now. The Shemitah year, the blood moons, these are topics that have been very much to the forefront among prophecy circles because the Shemitah year deals with a concern about, that's coming up in September of 2015. A final blood moon, which is a total lunar eclipse, is coming up in 2015.
Does this happen over Jerusalem?
In September. The final one comes on the holy day of the Feast of Tabernacles. Okay. That's why some people think it might be significant. Right. And it'll be red because of the total lunar eclipse scenario, and it will be seen in Israel. And that happens on September 28th, I believe, of 2015, whereas the end of this Shemitah cycle, these 7-year cycles, ends just a couple weeks prior to that.
First Nation people, Native Americans, have oral traditions and their prophecies which talk about the last days, the end times, the days of chaos. I've heard and I've read, and you and I have talked off the record about First Nation people, Native Americans, and their prophecies that came down, were handed down orally from one generation to the next. Do you think we're living in the time where these prophecies are beginning to manifest, beginning to come to fruition?
Well, absolutely, L.A. The things that are starting to happen at an accelerated pace. We're seeing from tribes all over the country. There's over 566 tribes just in the U.S., but there's prophecies stemming from Canada down to South America about the end times, as some say. Our people call it when the fires will come. Things like when Grandmother Spider's web will cover the earth was one of the prophecies that was given.
What do you think that is?
My interpretation of that is the World Wide Web.
Okay.
We have the web covering the earth. One of the most recent ones from the Mohawk people was that the trees would die from the top down. And we see that happening now because of the effects of acid rain.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many correlations. You know, we have our oral tradition that talks about how the earth was destroyed with water, and that there's going to be a cleansing of fire that's going to destroy the earth before Creator comes to restore things the way they were.
How did these prophecies come about? I mean, where did they originate from?
That's an excellent question. There are ceremonies. You mentioned the Vision Quest, you know, which is different for different tribes, but typically you have 4 days of fasting, no food, no water, and you're praying. The root idea behind the fasting is that when you're denying those things of your flesh, you're more open to the spirit. And in this case, you know, when a lot of these prophecies and dreams would come, it was through fasting, through prayer, connecting with the Creator, you know, and the Creator giving those prophetic visions and dreams. And then they would be passed on, you know, to the tribe. Other times it was, you know, medicine people, but it was typically always done through prayer.
And when you say Creator, you're talking a monotheistic Creator?
Monotheistic, for my people.
All right.
Because different tribes have different belief systems. But the East Coast tribes were monotheistic people, still are very much monotheistic people. And, you know, my specific tribe, we had prophecies that detailed the coming of the Europeans to our shores, you know, and believing very much that Creator prepared the way for the gospel to come to our people. So when I say Creator, I mean there's only one.
Okay.
And there's only one Creator.
What do you think is coming?
The war is going to escalate. Wars are going to come back here to this land, and there's also prophecies about that say that, you know, we already had the one war, brother against brother, the Civil War, but there will be another one, you know, and this will be a war of survival amongst our people, amongst all people, not just Native people. We see the acceleration of the communication and just the trickster, that evil spirit that's just at work in the world. We're seeing things at an accelerated pace that are just unfathomable, you know, to the era that we grew up in. The things that people are doing to one another. Mm-hmm. The love for one another is absolutely just being squashed, which again is also another thing that our people have told for centuries, that there will come a time where there will be no love in our heart for one another. And that will bring the escalation of war, which also is a sign of the things to come.
The world is prepared to receive science fiction. We're not talking about extraterrestrial biological entities. We're talking about ultra-terrestrial biological entities. They're from beyond the veil, the spirit world, and they're posing as people from other planets just to promote their program. And they know that we'll be only too willing to accept all that in return for some treasures, from a few goodies from on high. Now, all this sounds like sci-fi, and this is where sci-fi merges with the Bible. Right. It's not sci-fi, it's real.
In Watcher 7, a digital master of what may be the best UFO video of all time was given to Richard Shaw by Dr. Roger Leir only a few months before he passed away. The video shows a spacecraft hovering over the Sea of Marmara in Kamburgaz, Turkey, and was shot by videographer Yalcin Yalman in 2009. The video showed a ship with a viewing portal in front with what looked like two alien beings. It was then analyzed by the University of Istanbul and documented as an actual sighting.
What we saw was absolutely mind-blowing because it was the front of what appeared to be a disc and three portals In each portal, you could actually see beings, and some of them was the typical black-eyed grays, but there were other beings that were there also.
The master mini-DV tape was sent to Chile for analysis by Mario Valdez Santiago. Mario did a frame-by-frame analysis and found what he believed to be a third alien being.
What he did was he took and he did an analysis on the occupants.
Since the images from the tape were fuzzy, he helped by sketching in the details in an overlay. The incredible detail evident in Mario's work was astonishing, but Richard wanted to see if he could find the third alien himself using professional compositing software. He decided to do a follow-up analysis based on the original digital copy that Roger had given him. Since there's so much fakery in the field of UFOs, on YouTube and everywhere else, Richard is now going to show us the steps he took using Adobe After Effects, a professional compositing program on Mac, to see what else might be hiding in the original video.
First thing I did was to scale up the video to HD size, and then I needed to work on the brightening it up a little bit here. So I'm using the curves effect, which is, you can also find it in Photoshop, but this is on moving images. I wasn't really happy with what the curves filter would do. I used something else later, but right now I'm just trying to bring up the luminance. What I've tried to do here is bring up the brightness of it so that the stabilizer has something to lock onto. This is After Effects stabilizer mode, and basically the little boxes around what looks like the left alien's head, which seemed to be an object that I was hoping the software could find and lock onto. So that's what I'm doing here. It only partially worked. You see how it jumped by? I didn't do that. The software couldn't, it lost lock. Well, there you can see the little alien's eyes there. It's kind of interesting. I went ahead and let it just do a little bit more, and as it's going through it a frame at a time here, I was seeing the other alien heads and their eyes. I ended up putting a grid up on the screen and manually, a frame at a time, stabilizing it myself. If you look up into the right corner there, you can see the keyframes that were drawn in as far as position. They're all popping in, and down in the timeline there in the sequence window, you can see how all these are lining up. When I zoom into it here, you can see something in the dark space. That's what we're interested in, is looking into that dark space to the right of the two little alien gray heads that we've seen in other videos before of this same Cambergas footage. There's something there, and it's moving around really fast. It just almost looks like static when you look at it in real time. It was only until I decided I would slow the frame down that I really got the results I wanted. And also, I started using just the normal brightness and contrast controls. That's what I was doing there in the palette on the left. I also took the saturation down because there were colors in there of the ship. Some of it could be NTSC artifacting, because sometimes you get rainbow effects and other times you don't. Now you can kind of see you have to look closely, but we're right there where I've got the cursor going around, there's something there. Moving what appears to be its head back and forth, rotating its head back and forth. And, some people can see that and some people can't. I'm going to help by freezing it and blowing it up a little bigger and enhancing the brightness so you can see it. Now you can kind of see a profile of the alien head. The reason that we have such a speed differential, in my opinion, is that we're actually seeing an actual example of time dilation. In other words, the difference in time domains from where Yeltsin, the cameraman, was recording with his camera on the beach to this craft hanging out over the sea, perhaps a mile away from him. And the craft was levitating for several hours over this one spot, and according to everything that we've learned, there's always missing time components when people are aboard a craft, and this may be the reason for it, that it is an illusion, but to us it looks like everything is moving 10 times the normal speed.
The time dilation problem no doubt contributed to the blurry images and frames that had intra-frame blurring. The camera was no match for what was going on inside the spaceship. To help you see the footage better, Richard time-stretched the video 600% in After Effects and then doubled it again in Final Cut Pro.
What I'm going to do now is loop some of these passages so that you can see them backwards and forwards, because seeing the motion will help you see the aliens. I put the arrows up there near the large eyes to help you kind of isolate them. There's also something else going on, but here's the third alien's eyes coming up here. Here's the best shot I have of the third alien. You can see it turning its head and looking off to the side. Perhaps it's something next to him. The more I looked at this footage and examined it, the more that I began to believe that there was something else going on to the right of the three aliens. And it looks almost like a humanoid being dangling its feet out the front of the spacecraft. I would hesitate to speculate on what it might be. It's incredible that we can see anything, but I'm still amazed every time I watch this video.
A while back, Paul Hellyer, the former Secretary of Defense of the Canadian government, stated openly,
UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying overhead.
Fast forward, and we have John Podesta, who was on part of Obama's cabinet, who stated that he wished that he would have done more to allow the people of the United States to understand that the UFO phenomena is in fact real. In other words, he was trying to get disclosure to happen, which is just incredible. So we see that the information is sort of dribbling out, as it were.
Daniel says that the Antichrist is going to be a powerful man, exceedingly powerful, superhuman, if you will, worshiping a God whom his fathers knew not. In other words, some kind of demigod, and having supernatural power of some sort.
Fausto Perez has the ability to call down UFOs. He plans and invites others to see these events so that there will be witnesses. This time, there was a crowd of onlookers with 3 good cameras that zoomed into something quite incredible over the skies of Sequoia Park in California.
You want something to show up, you reach out to basically whatever's up there. And you try to keep positive energy about it, because that'll attract a positive entity to you. Because I've had people who tell me they'll do it at night while they're scared, and when they're scared, they don't attract anything good.
It appears to be a glowing, 3-dimensional entity with a very humanoid shape. Real UFOs often emit brilliant light of a blue-white nature, and this one is no different. This particular sighting is similar to the Flying Men video clips given to watchers by Jaime Maussan over Mexico. But this one is much clearer and more defined than anything we've seen in the past. The Flying Men phenomena is seen in many examples of ancient Peruvian art and is still being sold as souvenir items in Paracas. Apparently, sightings like Fausto discovered have been documented for centuries. But if these entities are bold enough to be coming out now, what might be next?
In 1948, Israel becomes a nation. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that the plowman shall overtake the reaper, the treader of grapes him that soweth seed. The mountain shall drop sweet wine, and all the hills shall melt. And I will bring again the captivity of my people of Israel, and they shall build the waste cities and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards, drink the wine. They shall also make gardens, eat the fruit. And I will plant them upon their land, Israel, and they shall no more be pulled up out of their land, which I have given them, saith the Lord thy God. And with that in mind, we know that Israel was gathered back, and that sets the stage for the rebuilding of the temple, yes?
Absolutely, yes. This is time that we can see big waves of Jewish immigrants from all over the world coming to Israel, whether from Russia, from France, for whatever reasons are. The nation has been multiplied through the last 20, 30 years. When I left Israel in 1986, we have had 3 million, 4 million people living there. Today it's almost double. And one of the signs for the Messiah to come and also for the rebuilding of the temple is that will happen when the majority of Jewish people in the world will be living actually in Israel.
And you're very close to that now, aren't you? There's 6 million in Israel now?
I think more than that. I don't have the numbers really.
But I know it's getting close.
It is.
Shlomi, we know from the historical record that in AD 70, the Roman legions came down into Jerusalem and laid siege to the city for 3 years. Before they completely went in, 1 million inhabitants were slaughtered. They razed the city, tore down the temple. The temple was totally destroyed. But in that 3 years, is it possible that some of the artifacts that were in the temple were scurried out or hurried out in tunnels or buried in secret chambers?
I believe that under the surface of this area, a lot of things can be discovered as far as furnitures or other tools.
So secret rooms, secret chambers?
Secret chambers. In fact, we have a testimony of a rabbi who, after the 6 Days Wars...
I know where you're going with this. The Ark of the Covenant?
Yeah, he has found chambers, and then Arabs find him over there, and there was a life threat to him, and the government of Israel decided to cement the opening of these chambers, and until today it's fully, we are out of it.
The story I heard, very similar to that, was they found the Ark of the Covenant, and when they told the head rabbi, and when they went to go look at it, the Arabs had already sealed it off. Is that a similar story, or is that just rumor?
I really don't know. You know, we're talking about mystic things, and there are a lot of rumors. And
we're talking about the temple, which is incredible. So, with that in mind, do you think we're going to see a rebuilding of the temple?
I believe that Muslims, mainly in the Middle East, mostly in the Middle East, believe that all the Jews and Christians want to do is to destroy Al-Aqsa, the mosque, and the Dome of the Rock, which is not a mosque. It's a building, it's a structure. But this is not so. It's not so because I don't see anybody in Israel has a wishful thinking of destroying mosque or anything that it's connected to Hashem, to God. So I think that there are other ways that we can rebuild the temple without hurting or touching the mosque. On the contrary, maybe the existence of the mosque over there and the existence of the temple as a neighbor will reflect on the reuniting of the sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Ishmael.
There's plenty of room to create a wall between where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is, and you could erect a wall, divide the two, and put the Temple Mount, or the third temple, let's say, right on the mount. What are your thoughts there?
We're not in a business of dividing.
Okay.
We're in the business of, not in a business, we're in uniting. We have to open our hearts.
In 1948 or late 40s, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, and then in 1952, the Copper Scroll was discovered. And of course, that's incredibly enigmatic, and only till recently have they been able to decipher what's in that. Tell us what's in it and why it ties back to the ancient artifacts of the temple.
The Copper Scroll, who is today placed in a museum in Amman, Jordan, is basically the roadmap for the temple treasures. And for years it was very, very difficult for whoever was handling the Copper Scroll, whether in England or in Israel, it's very, very difficult to connect the description of the scroll to actually locations in the land of Israel.
And the reason for that is because the topography is changing?
Photography, and also there are not clear names indicated in the Copper Scroll. I've heard that there is another Copper Scroll that will, in between them, you will get the puzzle solved. What do we all want? We all have one dream. Everybody has the same dream. We want simple life. We want peace. We want food on our table. We want to raise children without sending them to army, to wars. But we don't do nothing about it. Yes, we talk, a politician talks. I don't see any results coming out of that. And I truly believe that the only force to do that is the return of the divine to us, to humanity, as it was thousands of years ago. And
the
maybe
Messiah coming.
The Messiah coming, God is coming. I see God in every day of my life. Everybody sees God every day of his life. But I'm talking about the divine in the strength and capacity that it was in the two temples. That was the God obey, you know, build me a home, and I will dwell among you. I believe that's the only power in the universe who can restore our life and can give finally peace and love into the hearts of the people.
In 1950, Immanuel Velikovsky published a controversial book, Worlds in Collision. It was a detailed investigation into the operation of planets in our solar system in ancient times. He brilliantly postulated on how many of the ancient biblical events we read about in the Tanakh, more specifically in the books of Isaiah and Joel, may have reflected a change in our solar system. His research also paralleled writings in other texts from around the world, as well as Jewish mystical texts, the Midrash and the Talmud. The book was panned by the scientific community, but embraced by Albert Einstein. It may have been the inspiration for at least 2 classic sci-fi movies released a year later. The 1951 black and white film, The Man from Planet X, is a story about a visitor that arrived in a spaceship from a planet that came near the Earth. But the best film made the same year is the George Pal sci-fi classic, When Worlds Collide, which told about a coming planet that would impact the Earth and how a large ship had to be built so that a few lucky people could be whisked away to safety, a sort of Noah's Ark in space theme. In 2011, controversial Danish filmmaker Lars von Trier made Melancholia, perhaps the first serious Planet X film in decades, starring Kirsten Dunst, Charlotte Gainsbourg, and Kiefer Sutherland. The visually stunning film focuses on the disintegrating relationship of the 2 sisters in the story, which belies the overarching theme that the Earth is in dire peril, evidenced by growing anguish and astonishment over a new planet that approaches. In Watchers 5, L.A. asked Marshall Masters about his research on Planet X, who expected to see it in 2012. Watchers did an analysis of how some people may have photographed the 2 sun phenomena, proving that the bulk of those sightings were nothing more than internal lens reflections, and showed how that can happen. But the topic won't go away. So this time, LA is meeting with Gil Broussard, a researcher that studied instances of biblical events throughout history that may lead to clues that Planet X may actually be a regular visitor to our solar system, and may appear much more frequently than anyone previously thought. And it may solve a lot of ancient prophecies about the end of days.
We went through this in 2012. Planet X is coming, the Mayan calendar, the end of the world, but something is happening now. Why do you think in 2015 there's a sudden interest in Planet X?
I think people are waking up from what they're seeing as far as the signs around them, from numerous signs like the birds and fish kills that are massive. And
that's very, very well documented worldwide.
Worldwide. Earthquakes that's exceeding 800% rise, and we have extreme activity on volcanoes, and many other factors. Whenever you add all of these together, it seems like there's a common denominator that answers this, and that's an inbound planet of some type. Because off of our planet, we're seeing effects on the orbits of comets. We're seeing effects that planets are warming up, like even the moons, like the moons of Jupiter. There was volcanic activity, which we haven't seen before. And even the moon is showing a little bit further extension on its normal orbit.
Most of the photographic evidence we've seen that seem to point to Planet X turn out to be lens flares.
Puts it back up. Yeah, you can definitely see it. There is something right next to the sun.
In Watchers 5, Richard Shaw demonstrated this using Mulder's glass and showing what it looks like. And oh, there's two suns, the sun dog, and that whole phenomenon. Dr. Brooks Agnew concurs with our findings that we revealed in Watchers 5.
See Venus that close.
But it is a planet, right? Because it's not twinkling, or is that a myth?
No, I would say that that's a planet, yeah, but
it's Saturn.
It's hard.
Okay, Tamara wants in on this one. She's been Googling.
No, that can't be Saturn unless there's an eclipse going on. No, because you don't see Saturn as with a chunk taken out of it.
There are no surface features, there's no topography in any of these so-called sightings on the net. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, at the moment there is no valid sightings of Planet X in the public realm at the moment. Most of that is called sun dogs or lens
flares.
Lens flare, and maybe a few other anomalies that we may have another technical name. But right now, there's no valid sighting. If we had a valid sighting, you'd have multiple amateur astronomers giving you actual literal pictures, and they would be validating each other's findings. We don't see that. Scientists within the government that has contacted me, and they had certain working knowledge of experiments and testing. And I had the opportunity to ask them, is there a way of blocking the view of such a large object, whether using holograms, plasma, bending of light, numerous type of methods. And I was given a very short answer, yes, it does exist, but he would not expound on how, because it's secret.
Zecharia Sitchin's book, The 12th Planet, put Planet X on the map. Do you agree with his findings?
No, I do not.
Okay, that's interesting. Why?
Well, because when we no one validated his interpretation of the Sumerian text, and when we look closely at the 3600 year orbit, he didn't get that from the Sumerian text. From what I understand, he got it from another source. And if you go back and do the research on it, there's no valid evidence for a 3600 year orbit that was with data. And that's...
Do you think the orbit is much shorter than that time frame?
According to recent findings in the Chinese, Japanese, and Korean records of 1054, which is only a little bit over 900 years ago, which we're not dealing with the ancient texts per se, it can still be read today. With that report, it was called the supernova of 1054, but now there's scientific white paper reports that dispute it from being a supernova at the time. Supernova was seen 2 or 3 months earlier. This object that they saw for 26 months, and they plotted it at certain points, moved to multiple constellations. Supernova is stationary. It does not move to multiple constellations. So this was tracked. They gave the elevation, the height and everything. When we went back and plotted this, we have a very large object that came through in 1054, just 900 something. So that breaks the 3600 year orbit.
There are other experts like Marshall Masters, who we've interviewed him for one of our watchers, as well as Bob Fletcher and Doug Elwell. These folks believe in Planet X. They think it's real. So how does your assessment differ from theirs?
Well, the data points that there is a real object that has come through our past. But depending on if you're using ancient texts, there's room for misinterpretation. But with more recent findings, like using the Chinese and Korean, which is only 900 years, we see that it's a planetary body of some form. South of the universe, on a flat plane, is looking towards Sagittarius. And out of 88 constellations, all of the data, 4 scientific papers, where NASA as well sent the Pioneer and Voyager probes, about 14 biblical events point to one constellation out of 88. That's Sagittarius, and not just anywhere in Sagittarius, but on the ecliptic. And that's exactly where NASA pointed their Pioneer and Voyager probes. Matter of fact, it threaded the needle, I call that, because it went exactly between one of the Pioneers and one of the Voyager probes, right in the center. Same distance, same angle from each other. I call that threading the needle. Now, how vast is space?
Mm-hmm.
Can you hit the target like that from that far away? It took, what, 10 or 12 years or more? Well, I think more than that. Many years to reach it. That kind of limits the range from where to look.
You know, I've gone online and looked at Elwell's research and Fletcher's, and of course your research, which is incredible. Your presentation is amazing. The graphics are just stellar. But some researchers talk about Planet X coming up this way, and that's why we can't see it. And then it passes us, and then it comes around.
We have only one area to look at. That places us looking at Sagittarius as where it's coming from. And that's where it would come in at, then it would go around the sun, and it would exit around the month of the Hebrews of Passover. That's where we found it throughout the records.
Doug Elwell wrote a book, and he believes that Planet X is the sign of the coming of the Son of Man. However, when we go back and we look at the biblical narrative and what it says, it seems to indicate, at least in my opinion, that the coming of the Son of Man, the sign, is the actual literal coming of the Son of Man. Let's look at the verse and see what it says. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. What are your thoughts?
See, there's a particular qualifier that says all will see him right there. And people miss the section where he comes more than once because there's two taking aways mentioned in it. And they're qualified. The first taking away says a remnant, that means not all. And mid of night he's coming. And Elijah has to announce his coming prior. That means March. The other one, the taking away, is in probably the month of September, the 7th month of the Jewish calendar, where anywhere on earth you can be standing, and it's all believers, and you're taken to heaven. The first one here says you're taken to the wilderness. Wilderness has never been referred to heaven. This says the entire body. This one says a remnant. That's a subset. We got two different events. It doesn't say he only comes once. Once he comes for the bride, then this one he comes for the entire believers, dead and living.
Why do you call Planet X P7X?
One of the things, it qualifies the size of it, between 6.5 being about 7 times the diameter of Earth. Until we have an actual sighting, then we can scale it using optics.
We're interested in the timeline you made, comparing various biblical events to a planetary phenomenon. Briefly, can you explain some of the key events that led you to believe that they were due to Planet X?
Using this model that during the Chinese event of 1054, we have this overlay that when we apply this to these stories in the Bible, we have an exact match. When the flood started, it rained for 40 days, but you didn't have, the waters didn't start to recede after a great wind passed over the oceans, and then water started to recede. That's another impact, which is exactly 150 days apart. The Exodus. How did we get 3 days of darkness versus 3 hours of darkness during Yeshua's sacrifice? Mm-hmm. How are they similar? Because when the object was coming in, it collided with the planet Ceres, slowing its forward movement to 1/20th. So when it went around the sun, it caused 3 days of darkness. And you can almost see the sequence of events listed. You can prove out in a model. 45 years later, Joshua's long day happened because it didn't have the speed to go out into deep space. So it had to turn back around, go around the sun, pick up speed, and go out further. Then about 150 years or so was the Ruth and Job's trouble. Then we have another 200-something years. You have King David and Saul. They both had 3.5-year droughts. Mm-hmm. And then the next one was Hezekiah, where the shadow went backwards. And there's a misinterpretation in the English. It's not a sundial. We can prove that Earth tilted 26, 28 degrees about 3 times in history. So these models are working from the same overlay as the Chinese record gives us. God is in the timing.
Do you believe that we're about to see P7X again? And if so, how soon? September? Coming up soon? 2015? When?
There's data in Revelation 12:1 that points to a March entry, a possible date of March 26. But I don't have a crystal ball. I can't say that is definite.
Sure.
But for us to first see it would be around maybe October, December, somewhere in there, as a comet, if it's this year. Remember, we cannot prove out the data unless we have an actual sighting. If we see this object, and we have to qualify, he says you will see a sign in the heavens, is this planet announcing this particular event in March. And the other one would be what we call the normal rapture.
I believe these prophecies are for the time we are living in. They were uttered by Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christos in the Greek, or as most of us know him, Jesus, the Anointed One. He stated something that must have sounded absurd 2,000 years ago, and it was this: many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ, and shall deceive many. There are people claiming to be the Christ, or to somehow have fulfilled the second coming. Is this a direct fulfillment of Yeshua's words? Richard Shaw and I believe that time is short, that we are living in the days of chaos. That being said, if you think you know Yeshua, Jesus, but you don't know him, then you don't know him. The prophecies written thousands of years ago are true and real and are coming to pass. What will you do with them? How will you ignore what is going on? The planet is in many ways out of control. And I think we've shown how unprecedented the times we live in are. Does this reflect a cosmic war which has been going on for millennia and now, in these last days, is manifesting on our planet? Do events seem to be ramping up to a climax? The hope is the literal return of the King. He is good, and I know from knowing him for over 35 years that I can put my trust in him.
Don't disturb him.